what are we using these taxes for, and what's the purpose behind them, and the importance of collecting them and collecting them accurately. So we have, let me get to, I'm not sure if I want to use these slides or not. All right, so let's talk a little bit about who is covered. Remember, we're talking about this tax base here. So in order to determine what our tax base is, we need to know who it applies to, right? And then we need to know, once we determine who it applies to, we've got to determine what wages are covered under that, that's a part of our tax base. So in order to be covered for Social Security, we have to determine if somebody is an employee. So, and again, we are talking from an employer's standpoint. So put yourself in the employer's shoes right now, and you've got employees, and you've got independent contractors as well that you're paying. So kind of go back to that example. The only people that we have to be concerned with paying, withholding their Social Security and Medicare taxes are individuals who are considered to be employees. If we have independent contractors, those independent contractors are going to have to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes, but as an employer, we're not worried about that. We do not have to concern ourselves with withholding those amounts. The independent contractor is the one that's going to have to be concerned about that. So the individual, we have to determine that they're an employee as defined by that common law relationship. And I'll go back to, remember that 6-factor test, economic reality test that we looked at when we were talking about the FLSA. It's the same type of factors that we're looking at. Who has control, who takes on the risk, and all of those things. We'll take a quick look at those as well. We have to look at, so if we've determined that they're an employee, is the service that they're rendering considered to be employment under FICA law? So what they're doing, is it in exchange for their time, their talent, their skills, their expertise? Is it earned income? And then we have to look at the wages that they're receiving. There are certain amounts of wages, or there are certain types of wages and payments that are considered compensation, but they're not taxable for Social Security purposes or for Medicare purposes because they're specifically excluded. Okay, so we kind of have these three factors that we have to look at to bring us down to what our tax base is for this for the employee. Let's take a quick look to remind us of what this economic reality test is. So remember, we talked about, does the individual have the opportunity for profit or loss? If they do, then they're probably an independent contractor. If they don't, then they're probably an employee. And remember, no one of these things is determining. We're going to take all the information together. Who made the investments in the tools and in the items that are needed in order to generate that income? Who's the one that purchased the computer? Who's the one that purchased the tools? Who do they belong to? The degree of permanence of the work relationship, is it continuing? Is it assumed that this person's going to keep showing up from 8 to 5 every day until such time as they quit or they get terminated, right? Or is there a contract? We will have you do this work for a 3-month period. Now, again, that's not on its own determining, because you can have employees who have a short term. You've got temporary employees, right? So again, not on its own, it's not determining or determinate, but taken all together. The nature and degree of control. Remember, this is a big one. Who is in control of the why, where, when, how, all of that? Somebody walked out, right? So who has control? The extent to which the work performed is an integral part of the employer's business, and the amount of skill and initiative required to perform the services. Again, individually, these things are not determinative, but all of them together. So that's just a reminder. So that test that we talked about under the FLSA to determine whether somebody is considered to be an employee under the FLSA, same type of factors are used to determine whether or not then the wages that they earn are considered for our tax base in when we're going to calculate what their Social Security and Medicare taxes are. All right. So I already talked about that. One thing I do want to mention, so I think I talked about this. I know you've got a homework problem that talks about partners in a partnership. And I think we talked a little bit about this in Chapter 2. Partners are kind of this special category where they're considered to be self-employed. So a self-employed individual is just one person working in a job. They're just a single individual. A partnership is the same type of structure, but it's more than one person. So because it's more than one person doesn't change how they're taxed. So a partner in a partnership would not be considered an employee, and therefore any payments to that partner are not subject to Social Security and Medicare tax withholding, but they're considered to be self-employed, which means that they're going to have to be responsible for those Social Security and Medicare taxes. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out, like I said, because you do have I know you've got a problem in there that it mentions partners in a partnership, so I wanted to point that out. Okay, so certain special situations where an individual's income, either the individual themselves because of where they're working or how they're working, or the type of income they're earning, may or may not be subject to Social Security and Medicare tax. Government employees, there are some government employees, I think most of them are probably retired by now because this rule changed back in the early 70s. But there was a time where they did not have to pay into Medicare tax. So that is one exception. Like I said, that cutoff was a long time ago. So my guess is most, if not all of them, have retired, but there may be still a few. I mean, heck, we've got Chuck Grassley, who's been in government for I don't know how many years. He just turned 92. We have a senator who's 92 years old. Impatriates. So these are individuals who are not American citizens, not permanent residents of the U.S., but they're working in the U.S. They may be exempt from, here's that FICA term. I'm going to go through what that means in just a moment. FICA, you can kind of think of that as Social Security and Medicare. Exempt from FICA and Medicare tax if they're from a country that we have a treaty with. So there are certain countries that we have a treaty with. We say, okay, if your citizens are coming here to work, and usually it's on a temporary basis, because they're paying those types of taxes in their own country, they don't have to pay them here. So that's what they're talking. That's what an impatriate is. So somebody who's from another country, another citizenship working here. Expatriates, those are American citizens or permanent residents who are working abroad. So if they are subject to foreign Social Security taxes and most other developed countries, think Europe, Australia, Japan, some Asian countries, most of them have their own Social Security or social insurance program. So if they are working in a place that has their own social insurance program and they're paying that tax there, they don't have to then pay it here. So example, my first job out of college, out of undergraduate school, was I taught English in Japan. So I spent a year teaching at a middle school over in Japan. I was you wouldn't know it by the way I talk now, or the way I speak now. I was a middle school teacher over there, and I worked for the Japanese government. They had this program that they set up, and they still have it, actually, if anybody's interested. You do have to have a bachelor's degree, but once you finish, if you want to go to Japan, they'll take you for up to 3 years. It doesn't pay very much, I must warn you. You'll make a lot more as an accountant here, but if you're into adventure. So the government has this program. So I was an employee of that local school district in Japan. I didn't pay Social Security taxes on my income because I was paying into their social insurance program. I didn't get any of the money back. I just had to pay into it. But so I was an expatriate for that year that I worked there. family employees. So if you have a business and you employ, now they have to be an employee, so they have to be classified as an employee. A child under the age of 18, you do not have to pay or withhold Social Security and Medicare taxes from their pay up until they turn 18. Household employees, so these are those like nannies or cooks, if they're considered to be an employee, not an independent contractor, and they make at least $2,700 of cash wages a year, then they are also subject to Social Security and Medicare tax on those wages. Some other specifics, so inmates, medical interns, student nurses, there's certain limited circumstances where the work that they're doing is not subject to the Social Security taxes. Let's see, do I want to talk about this? So those independent contractors, just to kind of reiterate, if somebody is considered, you've gone through the factors and you've determined they're an independent contractor, the payer, or I don't want to call them the employer because they're not an employer, but the payor to that independent contractor does not have to withhold any taxes from their payment. So if that independent contractor bills for $1,000, the payer issues a check for $1,000. They don't withhold anything on it. That doesn't mean they're not subject to those taxes. They are, and you'll see when we go through the tax rates, they actually have to pay out the nose for those taxes. But it's now the responsibility of the independent contractor, not the payer of those payments. What else do I want to say? Oh, that's going into too much detail right now. That's just about misclassifying employees. We talked about that. We talked about that in the last chapter. All right, so